You know, when you walk onto a movie set, there's um, this unspoken agreement that everyone is in on. It's a comforting illusion,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like there's a safety net.
Right. You might see this heavy, solid brick wall, but if you push on it, it's just painted cardboard. And you know the weapons are plastic. You know the blood is just like corn syrup.
Because everyone involved knows it's entirely fake. That boundary between the performance and reality is, well, it's what makes the whole concept of fiction work.
Exactly. We can explore these dark, terrifying themes because there was always a director sitting right there ready to yell, cut.
But imagine stepping onto one of those sets where the lights are dim, the cameras aren't even rolling, and you suddenly realize the person holding the prop knife isn't acting at all.
Oh, that's literally the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah.
You thought you were just playing a part in this harmless scenario, but the person across from you has just completely severed their tie to reality.
Yeah, you find yourself trapped in someone else's horror movie, and they have absolutely no intention of ever calling cut.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are pulling from news archives, case files, and true crime literature to explore a deeply chilling story about the dark side of online dating.
And our mission today is really to unpack exactly what happens when that line between make-believe and real-world violence doesn't just, blur, but completely vanishes.
It is a sprawling, deeply unsettling mystery. And what makes it so terrifying to me is how aggressively normal the beginning is.
Right. I mean, it starts with something millions of you probably do every single day without a second thought, which is just looking for a connection on the internet.
So let's set the scene. It's October 2008 in Edmonton, Alberta. The weather is just starting to turn cold.
Oh, okay.
And we have our first individual, a 33-year-old man named Shil Tetro. He's recently divorced, feeling a bit lonely and vulnerable, so he decides to put himself out there on the dating site. Plenty of fish.
Which makes sense. That was super popular back then.
Yeah, and pretty quickly he matches with a woman who goes by the name Sheena.
And from the jump, Sheena comes across as very forward, very eager. They chat online for a bit, and she quickly invites him over to her place for their very first date.
Which is exciting, but then the logistics of this meeting
Hmm.
immediately start throwing up these massive red flags.
Yeah, they do, because she absolutely refuses to give him her actual home address.
Right.
Instead, she gives him these hyper-specific, almost bizarrely detailed directions to a rented garage that's just situated down an Edmonton alleyway.
Which would normally make anyone pause, right? I mean,
Well-
meeting a stranger in an alleyway garage at night is basically the exact opposite of a safe public coffee date.
Totally. But she tries to disarm that hesitation with humor. She explicitly tells him to pull into the only driveway in the alley that isn't paved.
Okay.
And she jokes that it looks a bit like the Amazon rainforest and, promises it won't swallow his car.
Well, that's one way to spin it.
Right. And she instructs him to look for a half-open garage door, duck under it, walk right into the pitch dark, and knock on an inner door that supposedly leads to her actual house.
So, Gilles arrives on the evening of October 3rd. He follows the instructions. He parks, walks under that partially raised garage door, and steps into the dark.
And this is where the atmosphere just completely shifts.
Yeah, it's like walking into a haunted house at an amusement park, expecting a cheap jump scare from an actor in a rubber mask, only to realize the monsters are real and they're actively trying to lock the door behind you.
That is exactly what it was like. So Gilles pauses just inside the threshold to let his eyes adjust to the darkness. And in that fraction of a second, a man lunges from the shadows and grabs him violently from behind.
Oh, wow. Just completely unprovoked.
Completely. The attacker is wearing a black and gold hockey mask, completely obscuring his face. And before Gilles can even process what is happening, the masked man jams a high-voltage stun baton into his back and pulls the trigger.
Sending a massive electric shock right through his body, which, I mean, that completely shatters any illusion that this is just a normal mugging.
Exactly. A stun baton is a tool for capture and compliance. He's clearly trying to incapacitate Gilles, not just, demand his wallet.
Right. So what does Gilles do?
Well, as Gilles is reeling from the electricity, just struggling to stay upright, the masked man pulls out a handgun, orders him to the ground, and slaps a piece of duct tape directly over his eyes.
Terrifying.
At this point, Gilles is facing this impossible choice. If he complies and stays on the ground blindfolded, he knows instinctively that he is not going to survive the night.
Your gut just tells you, right? Like,
Right.
This is it.
Yeah. So he makes a split-second decision that if he's going to die, he's going to go out fighting. He rips the duct tape off his face, lunges forward, and grabs the attacker's gun.
Wow. That takes incredible bravery.
It does. And in that frantic struggle, Jules realizes the weapon is incredibly light. It's actually made of plastic. It's just a fake movie prop.
That realization must have been surreal, but I imagine it gave him the jolt of adrenaline he needed.
Oh, absolutely. It triggered a brutal, desperate fight for his life. Gilles is taking punches. He's getting shocked repeatedly with that baton, but he manages to twist and slip completely out of his jacket.
Just doing whatever it takes to break free.
Yeah. He drops to the concrete and rolls under that partially open garage door, desperate to get back out to the alley. But before he can scramble to his feet, the attacker grabs him by the legs and literally drags him back inside the garage, caveman style.
That is just a completely horrifying image.
Yeah.
Being dragged back into the dark like that.
It's pure nightmare fuel. But Gilles is fighting with everything he has left. He manages to kick free, rolls back out a second time, gets to his feet, and just sprints down the alley.
And doesn't he run into someone?
He does. As he's running, he spots a couple walking their dog nearby. And the attacker's reaction in this moment is one of the most chilling aspects of the entire night. Well, the masked man, who has actually pulled his mask off by now, doesn't panic. He smoothly pivots into a performance. He looks at the couple with the dog and plays the whole life or death struggle off as a harmless joke.
You're kidding. He just acts like nothing happened.
Yeah. He calls Gilles frank, tells the couple his friend is just wildly drunk and acting crazy, and pretends he's just trying to get him safely inside to sleep it off.
And the couple actually buys it. Or, I mean, at the very least, they decide they don't want to get involved with two guys having a drunken brawl, so they just back away.
Right. But that tiny window of confusion gives Gilles the opening he needs to reach his car, lock the doors, and just speed away into the night.
He escapes with his life, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But the psychological aftermath for Gilles is devastating, isn't it?
It really is. He is deeply, profoundly embarrassed by the whole ordeal. I mean, he was simply looking for a romantic connection. He ignored the red flags. He got lured to a shady alley.
Yeah, he's probably beating himself up over it.
Exactly. And he ultimately convinces himself that he was just the victim of a random, humiliating mugging. The shame just overpowers his fear.
Which is a very human reaction, honestly.
It is. He rationalizes the event, trying to minimize it in his own mind, and because of that intense embarrassment, he doesn't call the police.
Which creates a terrifying reality. Because Gilles was too ashamed to come forward, that garage in the Edmonton alleyway remained completely undisturbed.
Unchecked and waiting.
Yeah, the trap was still set, the door was still open, and the predator was just waiting for someone else to walk in.
And sadly, 1 week later, on October 10th, the trap springs again. This time, the target is a 38-year-old man named Johnny Altinger.
Johnny is someone a lot of people can relate to. He works the night shift doing quality control for an oilfield equipment manufacturer.
Yeah, he's just a regular guy.
He's a passionate guy who absolutely loves his motorcycles. Like, he treats them with the kind of care most people reserve for their actual children.
Right, they were his babies.
But despite his hobbies, he's a bit awkward, a bit shy, and he is genuinely just looking for a meaningful, long-term relationship. So just like Jill's, he turns to plenty of fish.
And Johnny ends up matching with a woman named Jen. And Jen operates with the exact same playbook. She gives Johnny those identical, bizarre directions to the unpaved driveway and the dark garage.
And Johnny actually mentions this setup to his friends, right? And they immediately tell him it sounds incredibly sketchy.
They did warn him. But Johnny is an optimist. He's hopeful that this might finally be the connection he's looking for, so he decides to go anyway.
So he drives to the alley.
Yeah, and when he arrives at the garage, Jen isn't there. Instead, he is greeted by a man who explains that he simply rents the space to make independent movies.
And the guy even shows Johnny some movie props lying around to back up his story, completely neutralizing any suspicion Johnny might have had.
It was a very convincing cover, so Johnny leaves the garage feeling a bit confused but totally unharmed. He continues chatting with Jen online throughout the evening.
Okay, so he's still in contact with her.
Yeah, she apologizes for missing him and tells him to come back later that night when she's finally home, and Johnny agrees to give it one more shot.
But before he leaves his apartment, he does something really unsettling. He updates his Facebook status with this deeply ominous post. He writes, "I've got a one-way ticket to heaven and I'm not coming back."
Yeah, and after hitting enter on that update, Johnny Altinger vanishes without a trace.
3 agonizing days pass for his loved ones. Nobody can reach him. Then, suddenly, Johnny's friends, family, and even his boss received these highly unusual emails from his account.
And the contents of those emails are just absurd.
Yeah.
The messages claim he met this extraordinary woman named Jen. They fell madly in love over the weekend, and they spontaneously ran off to Costa Rica together to start a new life.
Which immediately sets off massive alarm bells for everyone in Johnny's inner circle.
Oh, absolutely. Because his friends know for a fact that Johnny absolutely hates hot weather. A tropical getaway to Costa Rica is literally the last thing he would ever do.
Right. Worried sick, they actually break into his apartment to look for clues. And the place is a mess. There are dirty dishes piled in the sink.
Not exactly the state you leave your house in if you're packing for a major international move.
Exactly. And his passport, the one document he would absolutely need for a flight to Costa Rica, is sitting right there on the table.
Not to mention his bikes. Outside in the parking lot, his beloved motorcycles are sitting completely uncovered, exposed to the elements, which he would never, ever do.
The only thing missing is his red Mazda. Oh, wait, let me just challenge the logic here for a second.
Sure.
If Johnny's friends instantly knew the Costa Rica emails were completely fake because he hated hot weather and would never abandon his bikes, didn't the killer realize how sloppy this cover-up was?
You'd think so, right?
Was it pure, blinding arrogance, or did the person behind this genuinely not grasp how real human friendships actually work?
It is a terrifying combination of both, honestly, rooted in a complete lack of empathy. The killer lacked the basic psychological capacity to understand Johnny as a real, three-dimensional person with deep attachments, habits, and observant friends.
So he just didn't see him as human.
To the killer, Johnny was merely a character in a script. Think about it. In a movie, a sudden romantic getaway to Costa Rica is a convenient, easy plot device to explain why a character just exits the story.
Oh, wow. So he thought life would just mimic a bad movie trope.
Exactly. The killer operated under the delusion that reality would simply accept his poorly written screenplay.
But reality doesn't work like a movie set. Johnny's friends immediately call the police. And crucially, they hand over the exact directions Johnny had forwarded to them before he disappeared.
That step-by-step guide to that specific garage in the alleyway.
Right. And that information leads investigators straight to the suspect, bringing us to the director of this entire nightmare.
So when police arrive at the garage, they are greeted by 29-year-old Mark Twitchell.
And he doesn't seem like a monster at first glance, does he?
Not at all. He presents himself as a highly ambitious, up-and-coming filmmaker. He's married, he has a young daughter, and he calmly explains to the officers that he rents the garage to use as a soundstage for a horror short film he's directing.
A film called House of Cards. But as he's giving this casual tour, the police notice the garage is absolutely covered in blood spatter.
Yeah. But Twitchell doesn't even blink. He tells them it's entirely fake, just corn syrup blood left over from a gruesome execution scene they recently filmed.
He's just so cool under pressure. He insists it's just the messy reality of practical effects.
But the police aren't taking any chances. They bring in luminol, which is a chemical agent that reacts specifically to the iron in hemoglobin.
And when they spray the garage and turn off the lights, the entire room glows bright blue.
The forensic team realizes they are standing in massive amounts of real human blood that someone had desperately tried to clean up.
And when the detectives ask Twitchell about Johnny's missing red Mazda, his alibi is so absurd it's practically insulting.
Oh, it's wild. He claims that a random guy walked up to him at a gas station, announced he was running off with a wealthy woman, and offered to sell him a $10,000 car for whatever cash Twitchell happened to have in his pocket.
Like that ever happens in real life.
Right. Twitchell claims he handed over $40 and just drove away in the Mazda.
Unbelievable. The detectives immediately arrest him, they impound the car, and they seize his laptop. And in the trunk of the Mazda, they find Johnny Altinger's blood.
But a physical crime scene is really only half the story here.
Yeah.
The police knew Twitchell was a millennial filmmaker who documented everything digitally.
Yeah, he lived on his computer.
And when forensic experts dug into his seized laptop, what they recovered from the trash folder was far more damning than anything in the garage.
They found a deleted 42-page document titled SK Confessions, which stood for Serial Killer Confessions. And it didn't read like a screenplay at all. It read exactly like a diary.
Yeah. The very first line stated, "This story is based on true events. The names and events were altered slightly to protect the guilty. This is the story of my progression into becoming a serial killer."
It's just chilling. The document outlined every single gruesome detail of the operation. It described luring men from dating sites using fake female profiles.
It detailed waiting in the dark, hitting them over the head with a metal pipe, and using a game processing kit for dismemberment.
It even chronicled a failed, frustrating attempt to burn human remains in a 45-gallon steel drum. A drum, by the way, that the police found sitting right there in Twitchell's garage.
Yeah, the physical evidence matched the document perfectly.
Looking at this document, SK Confessions, it feels like more than just a careless mistake by a criminal. What is the psychological drive behind writing a 42-page narrative of your own crimes?
Well, SK Confessions is basically a horrifying psychological profile of a narcissist. Twitchell had completely eroded the boundary between his identity as a director and his actions as a murderer.
So he saw them as the same thing.
Exactly. He was essentially storyboarding his own real-life violence. He wasn't just committing a crime, he was writing the script, building the physical set, casting unsuspecting victims, and then meticulously documenting his own performance.
He viewed himself as the untouchable, mastermind protagonist of a dark thriller, and the document was just his vanity project.
But even faced with this incredible piece of evidence, Twitchell's defense is to lean back into the illusion.
Right. He insists the document is just a fictional screenplay, a piece of edgy art, and that any similarities to real life are purely coincidences born from his intense research.
Which actually creates a unique hurdle for the prosecution.
Yeah.
SK Confessions is a chilling roadmap, but to definitively prove it isn't fiction in a court of law, investigators need to verify the specific events described within it.
How do they do that?
Well, in the document, Twitchell wrote extensively about a failure, a victim who fought back and escaped, whom he referred to as the one who got away.
Oh, Gilles.
Right. The police realize that if they can locate that specific individual, they completely destroy the screenplay defense and prove the document is a factual diary.
So the police take a calculated risk. They hold a press conference, and they broadcast a picture of the distinct black and gold hockey mask they recovered from Twitchell's garage.
And Gilles Tetrio happens to be watching the local news that night. He sees the mask flash on the screen, and the bottom completely drops out of his stomach.
In that moment, all those rationalizations just shattered. He realizes he wasn't just mugged by a random thug. He had come inches from being slaughtered by a serial killer.
Yeah. He finally gathers the courage to come forward and speak to the detectives. And his account of the attack matches the SK Confessions document line by line.
Down to the exact detail of being dragged back under the garage door caveman style.
It was the nail in the coffin. But the deeper investigators dug into Twitchell's digital life, the more they realized SK Confessions wasn't even an original concept.
Yet Twitchell wasn't just writing his own script. He was actively committing a lethal form of plagiarism.
The digital forensics revealed a massive, all-consuming obsession with the Showtime television series Dexter.
Right. And for context, Dexter follows a forensic blood spatter analyst who secretly operates as a vigilante serial killer.
The character meticulously preps kill rooms, entirely draped in plastic sheeting, dismembers the bodies to hide the evidence, and dumps the remains.
And Twitchell took his fandom to a terrifying extreme. He was actively cosplaying the lifestyle. He created a Facebook profile where he posed as the character Dexter Morgan.
And using that persona, he began grooming and advising a female follower named Renee on how to commit the perfect murder.
This part is so disturbing. He instructed her to use stun guns because they incapacitate without leaving forensic blood evidence.
He advised her to remove the victim's teeth to prevent dental identification. He explicitly told her to construct a plastic-wrapped kill room exactly the way Dexter does on the show.
When you look at that level of obsession, how does someone go from watching a dark TV show on their couch to actually hanging plastic sheeting in a rented garage?
Yeah.
Like, at what exact point does the human brain allow fantasy to hijack reality so completely?
It comes down to a process of severe compartmentalization and, honestly, digital dissociation. Twitchell had isolated himself inside a curated world of props, scripts, and online personas.
He was already living a massive double life anyway, right?
Oh, completely. Lying to his wife about going to a full-time job, having multiple affairs, and funding his entire lifestyle using money he scammed from naive film investors.
So everything was a lie.
Everything. When your entire existence becomes a constant curated performance, the empathy required to view other people as real human beings starts to atrophy.
That makes sense.
He didn't see Johnny Altucher as a man with a life and loved ones. He saw him as a physical prop that was necessary to achieve his ultimate cinematic experience.
The illusion eventually collapsed under the weight of reality, though. In June 2010, Twitchell finally provided the police with a handwritten Google Map printout.
Yeah, and it led investigators to a specific sewer grate in Edmonton, where they tragically recovered Johnny's partial remains.
The trial in 2011 was a complete spectacle. Twitchell took the stand, and his defense strategy was almost as bizarre as the crime itself,
He claimed the entire garage setup was meant to be an elaborate, immersive movie PR stunt.
which is just crazy.
He testified that he lured men there simply to scare them, hoping to capture their genuine, terrified reactions on hidden cameras to promote his horror film.
And then he claimed that Johnny Altinger got angry about being pranked, attacked him, and that he killed Johnny purely in self-defense.
But the jury saw right through the performance. It took them a mere 5 hours of deliberation to convict Mark Twitchell of first-degree murder.
He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years.
Twitchell was locked away, effectively removing him from society. But that deeply ingrained psychological need to frame his horrific crimes as character development hasn't entirely disappeared.
Which brings us to a recent update. Fast forward to the present day, March 2026. Twitchell is currently serving his sentence in a medium-security prison in Alberta.
And recently, he formally applied for temporary leave to visit her parents, which required him to sit before a parole board.
His testimony at this hearing is a fascinating case study in how narcissists attempt to rewrite their own history.
It really is. Facing the board, he drastically downplayed the influence of the show Dexter, claiming the media and the prosecution massively overstated it at his trial.
Even though he literally built an exact replica of the show's kill room and blogged online pretending to be the main character.
Precisely. Instead of taking genuine accountability, he framed his past actions as a creative process that tragically spiraled out of control.
He claimed he was suffering from an existential crisis, wrapped up in what he called a toxic emotional soup.
Yeah. He told the board he was trying so desperately to write a convincing script about a psychopathic killer that he fell down a rabbit hole to figure out what taking a life would actually feel like.
He essentially blamed his deep devotion to his film work for his violent actions. Wait, I have to stop on that phrase. Toxic emotional soup.
Yeah, it's a loaded term.
He claims therapy has made him an entirely different person, but he's sitting there using these soft clinical buzzwords to excuse a cold, meticulously documented murder. Is it even possible for someone with that level of premeditation to be rehabilitated, or is he just utilizing therapy language to write a more sympathetic script for the parole board?
The parole board ultimately recognized it as the latter. Narcissists often weaponize the language of therapy words like toxic or existential crisis to simulate accountability while actually dodging it.
Wow.
The board noted that while he had made some behavioral progress while incarcerated, they unequivocally denied his request for leave.
As they should.
They heavily emphasized the profound, lasting psychological impact his presence in the community would have on the victim's grieving family. Furthermore, they pointed directly to his documented, ongoing narcissistic tendencies.
They saw clearly that he is still fundamentally trying to direct the narrative.
He just can't help himself. During the hearing, he actually told the board, "I don't deserve to be forgiven, but I would really like a shot at redeeming myself."
It sounds exactly like a poignant line of dialogue he spent hours workshopping in his cell.
It is entirely performative. He is still treating his life and the devastating real-world consequences of his actions like a character arc in a screenplay.
We've covered a lot of incredibly dark territory today. Strip away the movie props and the digital masks, and at its core, this is a profound tragedy for Johnny Altinger, a good man who simply wanted to find a human connection and unknowingly walked into a nightmare.
Yep.
And it's a story of terrifying, unbelievable luck for Gilles Tetrel, who fought his way out of that exact same nightmare. Both of their lives were shattered by a man who completely severed the tie between his violent, self-serving fantasies and the real, breathing human being standing right in front of him.
It serves as a stark, enduring reminder of the very real physical danger that can lurk just out of frame behind a digital mask.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you to mull over.
Yeah.
We live in an age where almost everyone curates a slightly fictionalized version of their life online.
Right. We use filters to smooth the rough edges.
Exactly. We crop out the messiness of reality, and we carefully script our captions. We're all playing director to some degree. But Mark Twitchell used the internet to curate a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
It forces you to wonder, the next time you interact with a charming stranger online, how much of what you are seeing is just a carefully constructed movie set,
Right.
and who is actually directing the scene from the shadows.
Just remember, sometimes the cardboard walls are real.
Stay curious and stay safe.